Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. On this night, this holy night, the Yahrtzeit of Rabbeinu Moshe Chaim ben Yaakov Chaim Luzzato. For all those who may have come and waited for me, you'll forgive me. We had technical difficulties with our internet connection. All right, but Baruch Hashem, it just worked out. It's supposed to Rabbeinu Ramchal. So let's first start with having a l'chaim. Nishmas the Ramchal. All right, this is the custom. I make a Chaim Nishmas from Moshe Chaim ben Yaakov Chaim Luzzato Susa Yogel Mal Kol Yisrael L'Chaim Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Shakol Yadvaru. Okay. Since we're doing this live, so I'm inviting anybody who post questions, in the chat bar, and I'll respond to questions because I'd like to do something different. If you go to my website, you'll see evangelia.com, and you'll put in the search engine, search bar Ramchal. We've done this many times, discussed his life and legacy, and instead of just just saying basically the same stuff, just with a few new spins. If people have particular questions, I will be happy to respond to these questions. So at any time, I'll post a question or a comment in the chat bar, and I'll be very happy to respond to it when I as soon as I finish whatever point I'm in the middle of making. Okay, so I guess we start with a very basic biographical sketch, and let me tell you that if anyone would ever write a biography of the Ramchal, it would be classic. It would be classic in the sense that even though he only lived 40 years, he got an amazing amount done, and he had 10 lifetimes worth of turbulence in his short 40 years, aside from accomplishing amazing things. But like I said, he had a ridiculously turbulent life, more than 10 people go through, and who live full lifetimes. So let's start. And this is like a very basic sketch. And then we'll go into his intellectual legacy and how it is not just relevant for today, but it is the legacy that I believe we in the 21st century should be pursuing. I think it's especially called for us in living in what's called the information age. I think the Ramchal's derech is the derech. So he was born in 1707 in Padua, Italy. He had a upper middle class background, and he was well educated in Torah and in secular studies. He was already well known as a big Eloi at a young age, and he wrote his first book at like the age of 16 or so. Thereabouts, and it was a book about Hebrew, Lashon Lemudim, proper how to express oneself properly in Hebrew. It shows already a tremendous command on language. He would subsequently write other books on the Hebrew language, like Sefer Dikduk on Dikduk, and Sefer Molitza on eloquent expression, different forms of expression, but his Lashon Lemudim, which is also on the Hebrew language and how to best express oneself, a precursor for Sefer Molitza already at the age of 16. There's a very cute pilpul at the beginning, which actually has to do with Shavuos. But it's more like an agadic pilpul, al derech hadrush, a drush type pilpul about Kaflem Har Kagigas that happened to us. God held the mountain over us like a barrel. Interesting stuff, it's a little bit of lumdus, but it's like a lumdish drush, and that's at the introduction to that book. And it's actually very, it's actually all about Shavuos, and how we were seemingly coerced into accepting the Torah. Take a look there. I don't want to spoil the surprise. Interesting stuff, and it was it was more drush than pilpul, but it's a pilpul style of drush, as you will see over there. Which was not as that's I would say that introduction is very creative, and he wrote it for effect, but it does not reflect his intellectual legacy, because he wasn't about very fanciful pilpulim or fanciful drushes. He was about zeroing in on the thing itself, as I'll explain. Um, so, anyways, already, so I said he put out his first book at the age of 16, but he mastered all areas of learning and secular. He also was extremely well versed in secular knowledge. His parents got him tutors, and very well versed in secular knowledge. But in Torah, he was well known to be a big Ilui. He was a very close talmid of Rav Yeshaya Basan, the Mari Basan, who was the son-in-law of Rav Binyamin Cohen, who was the leading Kabbalist in Italy at the time. And at a very young age, he excelled and even delved into Kabbalah. So we're going to, we're discussing his life right now and what made him considered to be a radical. Yeah. So at a very young age, he mastered Kabbalah. But and his Rebbe, Rabbi Shael Basan, who was like I said, a huge lamdan. He was a big Rav, and as for being a big Rav, he was no stranger to Kabbalah. Like I said, his Rabbi Shael Basan's father-in-law was Rabbi Binyamin Cohen, like the leading Kabbalist in Italy at the time. So this Rabbi Shael Basan knew from Kabbalah really, really well. But the Ramchal let his how he delved into Kabbalah. He kind of kept it secret even from his own Rebbe, and he developed a very closed circle of confidants that he was guiding, particularly in the study of Kabbalah, where he was a prodigy in everything that he touched, but in Kabbalah he was just in a whole nother league. And many of his people in the Ramchal's closed circle were older than him. He was 20, 20, 21, 22, talking, unbelievable, and they opened a yeshiva that also involved the learning of Kabbalah. And they had some very interesting customs there. Very Kabbalistic oriented customs, like they had a rotation that for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, someone should always be learning Zohar, for Tikkun Ashchim. Right? And, amongst one of the things that they had there. And a person cannot get up from his learning of Zohar, whoever was appointed at that time. That was his time under rotation. He wasn't allowed to get up and start learning Zohar until his replacement would sit and start learning Zohar first. So there should be no break of learning Zohar. Someone should always be learning Zohar 24/7, and for Tikkun Ashchina. And then they had also, that was one thing they had. They also had their group learning, where it was very spiritually oriented. It wasn't just that they were learning Kabbalah. They were probably learning other things also, but the focus was Kabbalah. And they wouldn't start until the Ramchal walked in, and they said, and it started with announcing Tznu Kavod LaHashem Elokei Yisrael, right? Let's give honor to Hashem, the Lord of Israel. Like that, they were very, very, very spiritual. It wasn't this academia that there was had a very spiritual feel, to a very spiritual vibe. Like they believed that with their pursuit of the study of Kabbalah, which was very intellectual. It was also they believed they're holding the world. They believed they're fixing the world, and they tried to emulate the things that went on in the Zohar. That Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his Talmidim would engage in a rapid fire back and forth. And be osik in milchamta shel Torah, in a battle of Torah, all with the intention that with this we're battling the forces of evil. And the Ramchal talks about this in his writings, but it's clear from the Zohar, and he was imitating, the Academy of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, which produced the Zohar. That they participate and they ask questions, they give answers, and in the pilpul of question answer, you're, as it were, the questions, bring out what's wrong with the world, and the answer breaks, breaks that problem and resolves that problem, and doesn't just give a academic solution, but they cosmically, there's tikkun in the whole world, because all the problems parallel to the problem, to the question, have been resolved. Right? And Ramchal himself writes about that, how there's certain types of kashas and terutim, certain types of moves. They're like parallels to a spiritual sword, a spiritual bow and arrow, a spiritual catapult. Amazing stuff. And they were engaged in all that. And it was pretty much a well-kept secret. He wasn't looking to, he just wanted the few and the proud. And like I said, most of his Talmidim were older than him. He was 20 roughly, and he was unmarried, right? So taking the Ramchal, the Ramchal's side on this thing, he was unmarried because he was what we call the Ben Azai principle. Ben Azai, who never married because the Torah was like his wife, which the Rambam brings la'alocha, a person who is just so engrossed in learning, so enveloped, he's not chayav to get married. That's the Ben Azai principle, right? So it was like Ben Azai, too engrossed in learning to get married. So the Torah is like your wife, and your chidushei Torah are like your children, or your talmidim are like your children, right? And he was on that level, So here's the thing: what blew the lid. He took his Rebbe into his confidence, I do believe, independent of this. But what happened concurrently with this was, Padua was had a medical school. So now in Eastern Europe, until relatively recent time, until 100 years ago or so, if in Eastern Europe and in many European countries, you cannot go to university unless you're willing to baptize, right? Now, one of the few places to lift that restriction and allow a person who identified as a Yid, as a Jew, a practicing Jew, to come and study medicine was the University of Padua, where Ramchal lived. So there's like a lot of Eastern European yeshiva bohrim that wanted to learn medicine, wanted to, and they were learned people that came from Poland, or Eastern Europe, where there was already about the 1700s, already a big center of learning at the time. All right, already for a few hundred years, it's been a big center of your learning, right? Talk about it's after the time of the Rambam, after the time of the Shach and Taz, Eastern Europe. So you had these guys, they, the person we're talking about, I believe he was from Vilna, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so you want to go learn, to be a doctor, you have to go to Italy, because in Eastern Europe and at the time, even many Western European countries, you had to baptize if you want to go to college. Right, so it's one of the reasons why secular education never caught on in Eastern Europe. The cost for it was baptism, right? Okay, so you had this guy, Rav Kusiel Gordon, I believe he's from Vilna. He was learning in Padua, studying medicine. And he found out about the Ramchal, right? And what was going on with the Ramchal was way beyond some prodigy teaching Kabbalah. He had discovered the Ramchal's big secret. Right, Ramchal's big secret was that he had attained such a high level that he was communicating with Magidim, with angels, with the neshamas of tzaddikim. Right, we have a few transcripts of those learnings that were dictated to him by tzaddikim and souls of you know like Avram Avinu, like Eliyahu Navi, Mashiach. The Shamas of tzaddikim spoke to him and taught him Torah, and this Gordon, Lucille Gordon. He found out about the Ramchal and found out the whole business. Like he penetrated the Ramchal's inner circle and saw. He actually eyewitness of the Ramchal going into a trance and then waking up from trance and writing at incredibly inhuman speed the Torah that was revealed to him, by whichever angel or neshama of tzaddik that he was learning with. So now he wanted to drop out of medical school and just be with the Ramchal. And then the way this is Gordon talking, still Gordon talking. And he said that the Ramchal told him in the name of one of the angels that he studied with that no, he should stick with studying medicine. There's a certain big deacon with that. So he divided up his time. He was in medical school, but he would hang out by the Ramchal. And as the story goes, taking the Ramchal, taking a certain start. I'm taking the categorically pro Ramchal stance on this. The Ramchal would have not wanted him to reveal it to the world, but he couldn't hold back. So this Rabbi Kusil Gordon started sending letters to the people in Eastern Europe, big Rabbanim all around. We have an amazing treasure. A man at the age of 20 knows Kol Torah Kula in general and Kabbalah in particular, and he's talking to Malachim, and he's bringing amazing teachings. It's amazing stuff. I can't keep this secret to myself anymore. I want the whole Jewish people to know about this. Right? So now the time, where we're holding the time period that we're discussing was a time when the followers of Shabtai Tzvi were still around. Okay. And as is well known, Shabtai Tzvi, and his movement, they all claim to be, Kabbalistically oriented. And, with Kabbalah, to the uninitiated, which most Jews are, even big Rabbanim, don't necessarily touch Kabbalah. All right, so to the uninitiated, you could make a case for yourself because most people are out of their depth when it comes to Kabbalah. Right, so they don't know how to refute you. So, no. So there was a high alert, something like this, that man who goes into trance and he's engaged in Kabbalah. And it was in general a tremendous, reticence to Kabbalah in general in those days, in many circles. Shabtai Tzvi claimed that his stuff is all based on Kabbalah. The big leader of the movement was intellectual head of the movement was this Nathan of Gaza, Natan Azati, and he used to always make cases for what Shabtai Tzvi does or says, all from Kabbalah. Which if you're not initiating Kabbalah, so anyone who's just two steps ahead of you could pull the wool over your eyes. So Natan Azati knew Kabbalah well, and he knew how to, play with it. Especially the people that were not, his level of knowledge and erudition. So they couldn't see how he was pulling the wool over their eyes. So it became, there became a general mistrust of Kabbalah and Mekubalim in general, let alone this kid. This kid is only 20. And his kid going into trances and communicating with angels. Nathan of Gaza used to claim that that's what used to happen to him. He would see the Merkava, he would communicate with angels. So they thought this is another Nathan of Gaza, right? Because his own Rebbe, the Mariba son writes to Ramcha, how do I know you're the real thing? How do I know? Right? Nathan of Gaza used to do the exact same stuff, right? Used to go into a trance, wake up and write big, amazing ideas, which in the end he admit was all he made the whole thing up, supposedly, right? He gave a confession, um, towards the end. So it set off alarms. And there were two big Sabbatean hunters who got on the Ramchal's case, right? There's the famous Rav Yaakov Emden, the Yahrtzeit, who was on the case of many people. He's most well known, sadly, for his pursuing of Yonason Eibschitz, the Tumim, thinking he's a secret Sabbatean. But the Yahrtzeit, he was just looking and everywhere for Sabbateans. And it was his friend. We had a very love-hate relationship, more hate than love. Rav Moshe Chaim, who, interestingly enough, if I remember correctly, Natan Ha'azati learned by his father, right? Rav Yaakov Chaim, the Baal Lochas Katanas, if I remember correctly. Right, interestingly enough, right? So, they were so now these were Sabbatean hunters. And these letters got put the Ramchal on their radar, and they started their attacks. And they didn't feel that they even had to check because it's just too good to be true. He's only 20, he's not married, and he's claims to communicate with angels, and Neshamos of Tzaddikim. No way, it just can't be. This is this is fake. And if he's doing impressive stuff, like producing amazing, impressive, maybe it's the Sitra Achra. We do have a precedent of this idea that there's like false prophecies granted by the other side, pose as, being from the side of Kedusha. And they give you these, these amazing supernatural experiences, and they feed you lies. Right? So if they, to feed you lies, they have to first tell you some good stuff or some interesting stuff. So that so it's like this: he's either a big thing, or worse, he's doing witchcraft. He's in communication with the, the forces of evil. So, so now his Rebbe, Yichael Basan, defended him. But the rabbis of Venice, were not that far away. It's Padua, it's Venice, got involved against him. A lot of politics, and teams. And like we know from our day and age, when there's politics, there's no objectivity anymore. Because it also became like a power struggle. Because the Rabbanim of Venice, felt like they're the Rabbanim of the whole Italy. And Ramchal told them, listen, I'm not from Venice, I'm from Padua. Right? So I'm skipping a lot because I do want to get into the legacy. But if someone objects and wants to put a request for more biographical information, I'm happy to deal with it. But since you guys are being a docile crowd, I'll just continue monologuing. And we'll just make a long story short. In the crossfire, and sometimes, his Rebbe stuck by him. The people who knew him closest, the people from Padua, where he grew up, stuck by him. But anyone else from the outside thought it's just too good to be true, or it's suspicious. And if you're from the outside, so you don't know to trust this person over that person. To you, it's all equally on the outside. Like and big Mekubalim got involved also, and sometimes bias could affect the way you look at things. Like one big Mekubal from the time, Emmanuel Irgatz, who wrote the Shomer Amunim, he said he looked at Ramchal stuff and he said, I heard good things about the guy, But I also heard bad things about the guy. If I have to evaluate him based on his books, you know, I'm not impressed. I'm not unimpressed, but I'm not impressed. I know this stuff also. I'm also a big Kabbalist. Of course, there's a very big difference in age. Ramchal was very young, and Romano Ilgas was on in years at the time. Yeah. But and then you have some people look at Ramchal stuff and say this stuff is amazing. It's unbelievable. And I guess it kind of goes with where you started from, and also what the Ramchal is willing to show you. Now, in the meantime, just to show you how far bias went, the Ramchal himself wrote some books against the Sabbateans. Now, he wrote a book called Kinas Hashem Tzvakas, and that is to refute some of the doctrines of the Sabbateans, showing how it's not what the Zohar really meant. And he writes in the introduction to show the Salek Ta'ut Hatzvi. I'm going to, dismiss all the mistakes of the Shabtai Tzvi people. So Rav Yaakov Emden saw the introduction, said, mistakes. He calls it mistakes. It's apikorsus, right? You see, the man could not do anything right when people already had in their minds, there's got to be wrong, right? There's got to be a fake. I mean, another thing is, I don't know if the Yaibit saw this, but he wrote to his own Rebbe, Rav Yishayahu Basan, who for the most part was on his side, even though there were some points where he was very critical with him, as I will mention. The Rav Yishayahu Basan he was tough with his Talmud. He wasn't blindly following because he had adoration. After all, first of all, you have to think, he's admitting that his Talmud outshined him and reached the level of communicating with angels, which and he didn't just say, yeah, sure, buddy, yeah, whatever you say. But I saw a letter once that Shel Basan wrote to the Ramchal and said, listen, there was a terrible thing in Venice that they burnt Sforim. They burnt the Talmud in Venice. Or maybe it was in Rome. Maybe it was in Rome, the Xera that they burnt the Talmud. I think that's what it was. And the Rishel Basan asked the Ramchal to inquire from the angels that he communicates with what was the reason for that Xera. He took him seriously. He really believed that the Ramchal made it. And yet, interestingly enough, I read another letter where the Rishayo Basan attacks the Ramchal and says, people have said you've acted inappropriately with some young lady who is engaged to some young man. Seems the only, if the accusations are true, it seems you're trying to win her heart, even though she is engaged to someone, and you told her that you know what she dreamt last night, and you could interpret her dreams. There's very inappropriate behavior, and I don't want any excuses, because if it happened, it's just plain wrong. I'm telling you, this is what Yishael Basan, there's at the same time where, Yishael Basan was willing to buy that, he was communicating with angels. Ramchal sure writes back that none of that ever happened. The whole thing was a fabrication, as we say in this day and age, fake news. Never happened. But I'm just saying that it wasn't like the Rishayo Basan was blind. Rishayo Basan, believed in his Talmud and at the same time was tough with him also. And Rishayo Basan did his best, because he's a very respected Rav, to be the mediator that whoever Ramchal writes has to go through me. I'm in charge. And the problem is that the Rabbanim in Venice, they wanted to be in charge. Right? So that was the Mari Basan, he arm wrestled this Talmud. And by the way, interestingly enough, the Ramchal, for the most part, was mevatel tov to his Rebbe, even though it seemed that he had surpassed him. And the Mari Basan had arm wrestled the Ramchal to desist writing the books based on, which are transcripts of what was taught to him by souls. and whatever was written so far should be entrusted to the Mari Basan's right. Is give the Mari Basan, I'll give the Mari Basan his right, his writings that he had written thus far based on angels, and it will be by safe haven by the Mari Basan. Right. Okay, so I just Yaakov friend, as everyone could see, asked the question: why is it easier to get secrets from the Sitra Achra? Because the Sitra Achra wants to ensnare you. So but he gives you one or two genuine ideas, and the rest is all sheker. The rest is all lies. Right? So they do it to ensnare you. That's why there were all these false prophets in the days of the Tanakh. If a person is looking for a supernatural experience, the other side is very willing to give you the buzz, right? And even to give you one or two things because they want to, you know, win you over. And then they start telling you lies. And then they start telling you fake ideas and wrong ideas and cause you to go off. So yeah, it's the shortcut to hell, right? So a shortcut, in a sense, if you want a supernatural experience, comes pretty easy, include that maybe one or two things of truth, but then it's to ensnare you, and you know, and then they have you following them blindly. That's why, sadly, I mean, I could honestly, I mean, God forbid, Hashem help us. But people have been ensnared by the missionaries, and they swear that they have these amazing spiritual experiences. Uh, Hashem Yerachim, right? With Avodah Zarah Mamish, right? And I can believe now. I'm sure most of it is all psychological. That there's some stuff that just gets the dopamine going in the brain. But I can also believe, based on what I read, that there is a, as it were, a supernatural experience, but it's all coming from the other side. And once you have one of those experiences, the person's going to be a true believer, and then work for the Sitra Achra, who's masquerading as the Sitra de Kedusha. Totally adasof. That's why. It's so much so that the Ramchal says that this back in the days when people were aspiring for prophecy, there were yeshivas for nevuah, right? The Ramchal writes this, that the student prophet should be perpetually under the guidance of a master prophet, because the first few experiences are going to be fake, and especially a person who's just a beginner and he's hungry for his first big experience. That guy is the most vulnerable, he's most gullible. So the master prophet, the Navi Emes, that's already Buchsuk as a Navi, has to guide the Talmud. They should not be ensnared by the Sitra Achra. Who's looking for these people who are searching, gives them these fake experiences, but for a person who never had the real thing, if all he knows the fake experience is the real experience, right? He never had a supernatural experience. Right? So that's why it happens. Right? It's the shortcut that's that in the long run leads straight to hell. Shem Yerachim. Right? So, anyways, but all hell broke loose subsequently. And Rabbane Venezia, um, you know, uh, they wanted to be in charge, and they confiscated all those, the chest with the box with all the writings that the Ramchal did based on the Shams of Tzadikim got confiscated, and most of it got lost. Of course, it was Master the Aveda, and we got little bits and pieces back in course of the generations, right? Right. Did the Ivets have any other basis for it? Right. No, I don't think so. I mean, now look, the Ivets, The Ivets saw, he saw Sabbateanism wherever he looked. There are a lot of people that the Ivets was roidif, that we in this day and age believe were clean. Now, not the Ramchal, but there were a lot of Rabbanim that were interested in Kabbalah, and where the action was were in certain circles. If you want to talk about these in Yonim, and those certain circles had within their circles, people who came out to have been Sabbateans, because that's where the action was. In the circles where people spoke about Kabbalah, so there are certain people in those circles that knew people, or they were passing around books, and some of those books, in an effort to share knowledge, some of those books had, Shabtaut in them. All right, so that's the reason why a lot of people in Europe fell under suspicion. Just about anyone who was Isaac in Kabbalah fell under suspicion, because in the Kabbalistic circles and those where people came to schmooze about these things, so some people that came to the club, or where they were passing couldn't trace him around. Some of the people who participated in the circuit came out to be Shabtaim. But as I understand, the Ramchal did not have contact with any of these people, from what I've read. But he fit the pattern. Again, look, the fact that he was only 20 and unmarried, that's pretty scary. So he's a half a man, right? He's not sholem, he's not married, and he's only 20. These trances, Yeah, but the reason why I thought about that is that there was another thing that he wrote to his Rebbe, the Rabbi Shael Basan, a letter saying the Kisser of Rav Natan, Gonzam Velola Sarfa. He said, listen, what Natan Azati wrote, right? We should put them in Geniza, because obviously there's bad stuff in them, but let's not burn them, because there's some good stuff in them also. So it's interesting, right? So even though he the Ramchal was not, as far as I know, he wasn't associated with anyone. I might be wrong on this, right? But I don't think he was associated with anyone that was in Sabbatean circles. But he had Natan Azati's writings, and he said, he had read them, and he told his Rebbe, "Listen, this stuff should be put in Beniza, but we should not burn them." Now, so I don't know if the Yavit saw that letter, but the Yavit saw that introduction to Kinas Shazaz called Toast. Toast, that's not bad enough. Call it Apicorsus, even though the whole book is slugging up, right? Things that the Sabbatean said, right? So I don't know if he read that letter, but that letter, that's what he wrote to his Rebbe, Azati stuff of Nathan of Gaza, let's just hide it. Let's bury it. I mean, bury it. Hide it. I mean, totally hide it. Kenisa, but not Sreifa, because there's some real stuff in there also. Okay, so I don't know if the Ivets saw that letter, but but if the Ivets would have seen that letter, that would have been all the proof he needs. Right? So things heated up so badly in another interesting story that I read. Again, just showing how politics just rules everything. It's always been the problem. Always been the problem. Right? So there was a guy, Rav Nechemia of Perira, if I'm pronouncing the name of his city correctly, or if it was the name of the city. Right? So I think it was Nechemia Cohen from Perira, I do believe. So he was an Avbezdin, and he got involved in the machlokas. Right? He participated. I didn't think he was the biggest misnagid of the Ramchal. From what I read, he was just in the crossfire, but he wasn't defending the Ramchal either. Certainly not vigorously, anyway. Anyways, this Nehemiah Cohen, who was a Rav, he was an Av Bezdin in one of the Italian towns. So he actually was an amateur, just to show you how scared people were of Kabbalah, and how for a person who's not initiated, dabbling in Kabbalah could be an opening for the Sitra Achra to get you. Right? This guy who dabbled in Kabbalah, so he came under the influence of what was called, it was still a thing at the time, Christian Kabbalists. Right? That, if you think Shabtai Tzvi misused Kabbalah, and the next generation's guy Yaakov Frank misused Kabbalah, there were Christians that had Jews who were willing to teach them stuff. And they used the Zohar to prove the Trinity and all their stuff. God forbid, I'm not, I don't want to have to discuss this right now. Well, there's a lot of stuff in Zohar that if you don't understand how to learn it, could be talking about Christianity and as if God divided himself up, and as if there's a mother and there's a father and there's a son. I mean, chas v'shalom, obviously, none of that is what the Zohar really means, as the Ramchal makes very clear. The Ramchal had these things on his mind because Shabtai Tzvi and Yaakov Frank also used these things, misused Kabbalah for all this type of apikorsus in one form or another. Right, so this guy, Nehemiah from Perira, right, he got involved in Kabbalah, but he wasn't well initiated. And he hooked up with these Christian Kabbalists. And they kind of got under his skin and caused him to start doubting that maybe if you believe in Kabbalah, Christianity is true. Right? They managed to confuse him. And, they're, in the end, this Av Bezdin converted to Christianity. So, like, you would think that, the enemies of Ramchal say, okay, well, we lost one of our guys, and maybe it's because we're being rodef the Ramchal. Maybe that's our sin. Maybe that's what we're doing wrong. They took it just the opposite. He said, now that this guy converted to Christianity, he's going to tell the Pope about the Ramchal and what's going on. It'll be even a bigger Chil Hashem. We have to destroy the Ramchal at all costs before this this Meshumid brings this all to the attention of the Pope. There's a story I read in the back of the encyclopedia, Rav Yitzchak Lamportini, called the Pachad Yitzchak, who also he was from the Ziknei Ador, and he actually also went to the Ramchal to learn Kabbalah from him. He's sort of Ziknei Ador. So in the back of the book, they discuss. There's the people who put out the Pachad Yitzchak, discuss this story, and they bring a story like this that he got mixed up from the Christian Kabbalists, and he wanted to go to the Ramchal, secretly, like unofficially, that the Ramchal should set him straight and give him, fix him, fix his head, you get him out of his confusion. Which was an awkward situation because, like I said, he was involved and he was not particularly, he was involved, but he wasn't on the Ramchal's side of things, as being in the crossfire. But he would go. So he appeared incognito. This is the way the story goes. He appeared incognito, in Padua, and was standing outside of the Ramchal's yeshiva on Erev Shabbos. He wanted. And ostensibly, he put on the guise that he's a stranger. He heard big things about the Ramchal. He wants to join the Ramchal's yeshiva for Kabbalah Shabbos. So, but it was a closed circle, right? So they asked, they walked over to the Ramchal and said, "There's a guy at the door. Says he just, he just wants to come for Kabbalah Shabbos." So the Ramchal said in these words, As v'shalom al yavo, ein tikva l'nishmaso. You should not come here, and there's no hope for his soul. Right? That's it. And the Ramchal wasn't told who he is or anything. Right? And as the story goes, they told him, the master says you can't come. And whatever, so the guy left, and then he converted to Christianity. Right? It's kind of overlaps the idea that if you get into Kabbalah and you're not ready for it, the confusion could open you up to a lot of bad stuff. Okay, so the situation got very hot. So, like I said, those writings were confiscated and subsequently lost. I think they were supposed to be mailed off somewhere and they got lost. We have some things that we found over the generations. But look, to put it in context, the Ramchal was working on a lot of radical stuff. He was writing a whole other Zohar called Zohar Sheni. Right? He was writing Tikkune, his own Tikkune Zohar, all based on what the Shonim Tzaddikim were telling him. He was writing his own Sefer Tehillim. There's one kapitel left. There's one kapitel left of his Sefer Tehillim that he was writing, supposedly Baruch HaKodesh. That one kapitel of the Ramchal's Tehillim is printed in that book that I mentioned, Lashon Limudim. That's is the first book that he wrote. So the printer put in that the single kapitel that we have left from the Ramchal's Tehillim, right? Like, so I should have mentioned this earlier. He was doing stuff that was off the scale, right? His own Sefer Tehillim, his own Zohar called Zohar Sheni, and his own, And we're going to talk more about other stuff that he said that, he's got to be fake because this is too good to be true. This is too radical. New Zohar, new Tikkun Zohar, a new Sefer Tehillim, a Pirush Sefer Koheles, all dictates, transcripts of what angels told him, 1,000 pages long, 1,000 pages on Sefer Koheles. Right? Amazing stuff, like we said, it's as much as we have certain excerpts from the Zohar that he was working on, we have his Tikkun Zohar. The Tikkun Zohar from Shem Baruch Chaim and his Talmidim is all 70 drachim, 70 drushes that start with Bereshis Baruchim. That's a starting point, Bereshis. Right? His Shivim Tikkunim are 70 drushes on the last pasuk of Baruch Chol Yada Chazak Chol Moragon. It's all transcripts of things that angels told. It's all B'Lashon HaZohar, that Aramaic of the Zohar. Right? Radical stuff. This is like radical stuff. And so what we have, the little bit that we have is like a tipa min hayam, right? And that was the main Rash. Okay, so things got really hot. He left Europe. Not left Europe. He left Padua, and he started traveling. So what happened was he went to Germany and his travels went into Frankfurt, right? And like the custom is, I believe it's Allah. You go give shalom to the Rav, right? So he went to Rav Yaakov Katz, who was at that time the Av Bezdin of Frankfurt, and said, Moshe Chaim Luzzato from Padua. Luzzato, we've heard of you. He had him put in a slammer, right? In those days, Kehilas had their own little jails in the basement of, the Moistus. The Jews had somewhat of autonomy, whether I don't know if it was legal or not, but Jews had, supposedly in Prague also, I think in the Out-Now Shul, certain shuls, ancient shuls, there's like a slammer in the cellar over there where they chained people up. Guy was a guy, kind of did bad stuff. They used to lock the guy up. Mamish. Anyway, so they was like locked up for 3 days. So you're never getting out of here alive until you sign a confession that you're a big fake. But he thought it was pikuach nefesh. So the Ramchal's side of the story is that he was Moser Moda in front of everybody and said, this is a lie. I'm Moser Moda that this is all sheker, and my signature is not sincere. It's only because you guys are forcing me. But what do they care? They had a signature, and they immediately reproduced the letters. And the Mari Basan was devastated. He saw the letter. He said, "You fooled me. You're a fake. You confessed in writing, Barabin, that you're a fake." And Ramchal said, "What do you mean? They put me in jail, and I was Moser Moda. If you'll find anyone that's an eyewitness, I was Moser Moda. It's all sheker, and I'm doing this because my life is in danger with you guys." All right. There's so now the long and short of it is he found refuge in Amsterdam, and that's where he was for the more tranquil period of his life. But but he had to stay. You know, they upped the ante on him, right? That in course of all the shakeups, that initially you just can't write stuff from the name of angels, and name of neshamas of tzaddikim. The but they upped the ante. They now to write in Kabbalah at all, right? So he at the time when he that was there that cherem, I think if I'm not mistaken, again this is all off the cuff, and you could also check in shiurim on the website from previous years. I believe that the Rabbanim of Venice, put this on him, and the Mari Basan told him to stick with it, right? As Rebbe, but he put in a clause, the insert clause, Kozman Heyoti B'chutzlaretz. Now to write in Kabbalah at all, so long as in Chutzlaretz. So Ramchal got that clause in. He managed to insert that clause, so long as in Chutzlaretz, right? Which means what we have from the Ramchal in Kabbalah, right? Is all from when he was like between ages of 20 and 30 or so. Before he this new stricter cherem. So his adir b'marom, his klach, all that unbelievable stuff, which we learn. I'm not even talking about certainly the stuff from the angels is from that kufa, but even the stuff that is well learned for those who are pursuing Kabbalah, on an advanced level. His advanced stuff in Kabbalah was all written, really, in his 20s and early 30s, because the last major coup of his life was in Amsterdam. Now, the Jews in Amsterdam were very good to him. That's why a lot of the Kisrei Ramchal, the manuscripts were in the Eitz Chaim library, the Kill of Eitz Chaim in Amsterdam. So now over there, he was clamped up, but he was a creative genius. So all the Sfarim that are more well-known and more learned because they're easier and they're not hardcore Kabbalah, it's what he wrote when he was in Amsterdam. So first of all, Mesilas Yesharim. And also his book on Gemara, which we're going to discuss. I started learning it again today. It's I appreciate it a lot more now than when I first learned it, decades ago. His book on Gemara, Derech Tvunos, is a book, but he also wrote his Derech Hashem and his Das Tvunos. All these things he wrote when he was in Amsterdam, right? Because he couldn't write in hardcore Kabbalah, which means the Klach and the Adir B'Moram, these things were all written before. So that's why he wrote his books that that are more commonly learned because they're easier, more accessible. He wrote that all in Amsterdam. Now they were nice to him there, and he had patrons, but it wasn't like that he had as easy as his life was because he had safe haven there. But he still had to work for a living. He didn't get a total free ride. He went to work. Ramchal went to work. So as much as there were patrons there that helped him with his books and helped him out, but he was working as a diamond cutter. He polished diamonds, he cut diamonds. I believe that's what he did, right? Diamond cutting. He went to work. Interestingly enough, believe it or not, one of the few times the Yahrtzeit, as it were, admitted, I don't know how stark it was, they may have been wrong, was by the Ramchal. Like the Yahrtzeit never thought he was wrong about Rabbi Yonasan Eibchitz or other people that, but the Ramchal, there's actually one of the things that even though the Yahrtzeit wrote against Ramchal, in one of his later books, he actually printed a retraction. It said, I hear this guy was actually really something else. And maybe he did speak to Malachim. And I don't know if he did, if he didn't. And if he did, well, it should only be so Roy. And I said, I also heard that he worked for a living. Yafet Talmud Torah and Derech Eretz. I'm not kidding. He writes that. That's also, that's honorable. The man, worked for a living, didn't, wasn't Nenem Kisra Shel Torah. He mentions that as one of the milas in the Ramchal. So believe it or not, the Ivitz actually was Choserbo at the end. I think the Ramchal was dead already when the Ivitz, was interesting. Now look, Ramchal was dead already, as I understand. So there was no, it was safe to say good things about the Ramchal because Ramchal's dead now anyway. So it's not like the Ramchal would, on its side that you're wrong, that the Ramchal get a large following, right? But that's what it was. He just mentioned that. I also hear that he worked, to put in good honest day's work, to be Mafarnis himself. But he wanted to get back to Eretz Yisrael, not just for the Madregas of Eretz Yisrael, but that's when he'd be released from the commitment that he felt was, he signed fair and square, not under duress. I mean, he didn't want to, but he Lamasa and Midas signed, so he wanted to get out of the problem. He wanted to start teaching and writing Kabbalah again because he had a lot more to give, and that's why he went to Eretz Yisrael. Right? Sadly, it should be his misa should be a kapora and a mugain for us because misa sadikim is machaper and saves from. But he made it to Akko. That's where he lived at the end of his life. There's a shul where he davened in, but that shul was destroyed. And the shul that's called Beit Knesset or Ramchal today is not the original one they actually davened in. It was the one that they got from the Arabs after the Arabs took over. The one that the Ramchal actually did daven in. That was what they gave instead. Right. So, but there was a Rahman son-in-law, a Magefa in Akko. Like today, there's a pandemic. There was a Magefa, and he and his wife and his son. In course of, I should have said earlier, he was initially unmarried, but to take off the heat, he married the daughter of David Pinchi, I think his name was, Italian Dian, and he actually had one son with her, and they all died, Miss Magefa and Akko. Now, since he died in Akko, there's great speculation that what's considered to be his kever in Tveria may not really be his, because it was. But what more reinforces that, and some historians say that there's some Arab village near Akko where they think he's really buried. Because what reinforces this idea, he's not buried in Tveria. So in fact, the Tveria is a little bit quite a ways away. Was a letter from the Mari Basan. After Mari Basan heard that he died, he felt terrible because, like I said, the Mari Basan at the end of the day believed in the Ramchal, held of the Ramchal. So of course the enemies of Ramchal said, "Look, he died at the age of 40. So it shows he must have not been a tzaddik. Would have been Marach Yamin." And here's what the Mari Basan writes in a letter, and he says it's the opposite. He was a nitzait of Moshe Rabbeinu. His name was Moshe Chaim. He was a spark of the neshama of Moshe. Right? Moshe died in Chutz La'aretz. We would have had Moshe Rabbeinu in Eretz Yisrael with us. We know we would have had the Gulat Shlema. Like everyone knows that, right? But it's because we weren't Zocher in Moshe in Eretz Yisrael, right? If Moshe would have come into Eretz Yisrael, everything would have been fixed. Mashiach would have come, and the first Beis Hamikdash would have been the Beis Hamikdash, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't make it to Eretz Yisrael. He made it, but he was a Nitzotz Moshe Rabbeinu, but he only made it to Akko. So now we know from the Sugyot in Gittin, amongst other places, Akko's a suffix. It's a suffix. He made it to a place that's suffix Eretz Yisrael. So he advanced the Tikkun one step further. Right? If he would have made it into Eretz Yisrael Mamish, beyond Akko, right, which is a border city, it's a border with Chutz La'aretz. That's why we have this issue. Again, you have to say before I nechtav if you bring a get from Akko, right? So now, if he would have made it in Mamish, would have been the Tikkun HaShalem. But all right, he managed to advance the Tikkun that he was a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu, made it to at least Suffolk Eretz Yisrael, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu that was barred from Eretz Yisrael totally, which leads so they bring that letter. So wait a minute, just like Moshe Rabbeinu died in Chutz La'aretz and was buried in Chutz La'aretz, so Ramchal made it to Akko. So Mr. was buried in Akko also because he can't advance further. They bring that as another raya for speculation that the real kever may be in some, what may now be an Arab village nearby. Okay, we spent so much time discussing his life. Just a few words on his legacy. So first let's have another Chaim. After all this, one Chaim. And by the way, you can ask me questions. There's his legacy, his intellectual legacy, generally speaking. And there's his enduring legacy as far as Kabbalah. I'm talking about what's enduring, not stuff that got stolen. That's amazing stuff, the stuff that he was taught in the name of Malachim. And I'm talking about his enduring legacy, what we get from Klach B'Schei Chochmah, what we get from the Adir Bamar, what we get from the Klolim and the Das Tfunas, all these things, so his legacy in general is that, which he describes it the best in his introduction to the Derech Hashem, but it's echoed in the introductions they wrote to other Sfarim they wrote introductions to. Right, that any field of knowledge, there's the details keep on expanding. Because there's any branch of knowledge and anywhere, see if it's just biology, but it's so much more to discover about biology, much more to discover. See if it's only biology, but the details could go on forever. We're still discovering new things, right? And and when you even the stuff that we know already, you go. If you want to break it down to every single cell, there's infinite number more cells than we can count. So you say like this, well, there's the details, and then there's the principles. And here's the confusion. Isolating, the principles from the details. Because you want to go detail by detail by detail, you'll go crazy. You have the principles, and you see the essential system, you have a framework. And once you have a framework, see if you don't know all the details, but you have a certain grasp of the whole thing, and every new detail they have automatically fits into a mental filing cabinet they have. So it's easy to remember, and it's also amazing to appreciate because you know what difference this detail makes, because you have a picture of the whole, so you know exactly what it affects and what it changes, right? As opposed to you have no concept of the whole, so you're just like collecting nuts and bolts, but there's no engine, right? The unique genius of the Ramchal in anything that he touched, and that's any book that he wrote. It's his book on Gemara, his book on Dikduk. His Mesilas Yesharim is he zeroes in on the essential system. He sees the forest, not the trees. He sees the wholeness of the forest, and he says captures it in few words that you see the rest is just details, and he defines the principles so well that they are totally adequate to contain all the details that could ever be connected to that principle. So he gives you a picture of the whole, and he gives you principles, right? Sort of like Mishnayos, how Mishnayos, every Mishnah holds like an amazing amount of details. What the Gemara is, it's built around the Mishnah, just to explain everything that the Mishnah is alluding to, right? So Ramchal wrote like Mishnayos, and that's the whole mitzvah of Derech Hashem, but also not just principles. That if you have this principle straight, mimela, millions of details, even though you're not aware of them yet. And when you become aware, you'll say, it belongs here, and you have a place to file it, not just to remember it, but to understand its place in the world, its place in what it changes, what it's a part of, what it affects. Right? So that's the mahus of his genius. It's like I'm now reading his book on Gemara. So the Gemara is about as big as Encyclopedia Britannica. And Ramchal in 60 short pages explains every type of lashon of Gemara you'll find, the types of coined phrases, the memros, the types of shilas, the types of chuvas. So even if in detail there's more kashas and terutzim and members than we can count, but he'll tell you the types. And if you have these categories straight, you understand where Gemara is coming from and how Gemara works. Right, and the same thing with his book on Hebrew language. All his books are amazingly brief. So Mesilas Yesharim is a systematic work of how to become a tzaddik. And as he says, he chose that price of Pinchas Ben Yahr's. Was a systematic approach, and he breaks it up. He's mavir what the midah is, and how to be kona the midah, and how to avoid anything that will strip you of that midah, that will break that midah for you. He was a systematic thinker. The only one that was like the Ramchal, closest in time to the Ramchal, like the Ramchal, was the Rambam. The Rambam was also a very systematic thinker. That's why, first of all, he started with building around the Mishnah, and then what are the Taryag mitzvahs and why are these the Taryag mitzvahs? And then the Mishnah Torah is like the new Mishnah. It's converting the Gemara into Mishnah, super organized, and then in short words, saying a principle that captures anything that could be nichlo. And that, as we know, when we learn a Rambam, we're medayik on every word, and we're medayik from the Seder of why he put it here, and in these halachas and not in those halachas, in this parak and not in that parak. See how he grouped it together? Systematic thinking, right? He was a man of systems, and really he zeroed in on the system and defined the principles short and sharp in a way that the principle adequately is a cloud that will contain all the details that could ever possibly be nichlal in them. Right? So that's his general jam. We need this so much in this information age. There's so much information. Well, first of all, there's a lot of fake news, right? And we need a systematic way of thinking. And that's what he writes in this Hakdama to his book on Gemara. He wants to explain the system of Gemara, that the Gemara brings proofs and brings havaminas and rejects them until you have the pure distilled, the maskana. He said, I want to zero in on the system of Gemara. So not just as a Hakdama to Gemara, but you should have a system of thought in your own head to zero in on truth and know how to weed out all the fake news. God, do we need that? We live in the information age, but all this information is overloading. And that's why you can have a fake narrative, because sometimes too much information, you lose control and you lose your grip. Right? And that's what we need. We need systematic thinking. We don't need translations, and we say the kids have ADD, they can't focus, so make everything easy. That's not the answer. Make things systematic. We have to go back to a systematic way of learning and give kids Yahrtzeit principles, thought out. We should restructure our educational system that's more systematic, and you build kids frameworks. During this quarantine, I've taken up reading, and decided to teach myself about neurology and brain chemistry and ways of thought. And what I'm reading, amongst a lot of things that telling me we're doing things wrong, and making things simple and watered down is not the approach for our generation. It's wrong. Our generation, we may have like shorter attention spans than that. But first of all, there's neuroplasticity, and we can fix that. We don't have to give in to it. We can fix it. There's ways how, but also just give people not watered down, give them systematic learning. And that way, when they learn Gemara, if they already know, as an example, Mishnah is cold, and you gave them a good overview to that Masechta before you start learning, it'll be geschmack. It fits into a framework. As now it's just like a lot of details. What's the geschmack in that? And you'd also understand why lumdus works and the difference that lumdus makes if you have a certain framework, right? Don't get me started, really. It says I'm looking for partners to revamp the Jewish educational system. Any people out there want to work with me, I'm looking for partners. We start from kindergarten, 12 grades. Go with my system. Guys will be learning on a advanced base measures level by 10th grade. They'll really know Kol Torah Kula, right? But you're interested in working with me, reach out. Anyways, we need systematic approach. Systematic, and he was a man of systems. And he wrote these short books that give you a picture of the whole and all the principles. The rest are just details. And after, if you internalize, you put that filing cabinet in your head, right? Sky's the limit. You could just be plowing through material and you have where to plug it in. And you also, since you have the framework, you know what has to be false because it don't fit in the framework, right? And that's where I read, and in the readings that I'm doing, it says the difference between, the geniuses that accomplish a lot, like Bill Gates or like Warren Buffett, made a lot of money, it's not that they have a higher IQ. They don't. He proved it. Their IQ is, plenty of people with the same IQ or higher. They're systematic thinkers. They're not thinking, Hefker. They're brilliant people, but they're not thinking, in a systematic way. The people that have systems in their head, organized, systematic thinking, those are people who go for it. It's something important to bear in mind. So that's Ramchal's, intellectual legacy in general. He was a man of systems, and every book that he wrote is a systematic work, zeroing in on the system. That's a Klal Gadol. Okay, so now this genius itself was indispensable for Kabbalah, right? So I'm even talking about the stuff that we learn, right? So one aspect of his of his contribution to the field of Kabbalah was same as his contribution to everything that he touched. He saw the system, right? You see, the thing that with Kabbalah is, so we'll take the two most classical texts that have like a Talmud, like a Mishnah Talmud relationship, or a even Tanakh and Gemara relationship. That's the Zohar and the Kisvei Ari. And both of them are written in a style of like drush, like they start with a pasuk. Someone asked a question, or the Ari would raise a question, and you bring a medrash, and it rolls like a pilpul, right? At the end of the day, you gotta pull in the information, what actually was learned. It's not written as, these books are not written as systematic works. They're written as, like the Gemara. And that's why we need the Rambam, let's say, on the Gemara, right? It's very hard to figure out the halacha l'maaseh from the Gemara, keeping track of the Havaminas that were rejected, and what of the Havamina rejected. Was the entirety of the Havamina rejected, or only certain elements, right? It's hard to keep cheshbon, and that's what the Rambam did for us in the Mishnah Torah, right? Systemized it, right? And put everything in its proper place, right? And then a sugya and Gemara, the Gemara could bring a raya from something totally different, because that's the way of pilpul, right? So you bring in a proof from something, from something in Torah. So in one Gemara, it's a sugya in Yavamas, let's take an example. Sugya in Meruba, and there's a lot of chidushim in Hilchos Mikvos, as we know from Meruba, right? Now so much so that the Hilchos Mikvos, the Rosh is in Meruba, right? Because the Gemara, talking about Shinui, right? Gets into Mikvos, right? Amazing, right? That's the way of pilpul. But that's not. But when you want to write halacha l'maaseh, so wait a minute, you got to like separate that stuff. They crossed over in the pilpul, right? But now so now we have the same problem with the Zohar. We have the same problem with Ari. That it's all written in a pilpul type way, and that's what led to a lot of confusion in the writings of the Ari. Right? So the Ramchal came and systemized it all, and he says, and he writes that in his klolim, which is also the genius of the klach, right? His klolim, he was mesader, and resolves a lot of stirics that there are between the writings of the Ari, because since it was bederach pilpul, you don't realize that the thing mentioned, that drush, which is not talking about the exact same thing as in this drush, and therefore it's not correct, because this is talking here and this is talking there, right? He revealed the system because the Kisvei Ari are written in a very drush type style. That's in fact the way that the Ari originally delivered it. Rav Chaim Vital tried to systemize it, but he didn't want to tamper too much and want to leave the drushim intact. Even though he tried to be misader the drushim in a logical way, but he didn't totally disassemble and reassemble. He tried to stick with the original format the way he heard it. And Ramchal came and revealed the system. And that alone, and he writes in a lot of places, my klolim, my principles I lay out, principles of Kabbalah, right? They resolve so many kashas and steers in Yari, even without even raising what they are. It's not even a way of kasha teretz. You see it, there was no kasha to begin with. The kasha was because you didn't have a concept of the whole. So you sort of this thing contradicts this thing. When you realize that this was talking here and this was talking there, no contradiction anymore, right? Just have a picture of the whole and where everything fits. And a lot of contradictions fall off automatically, or rather, not fall off, never really started. Right? So that's so that system, his systematic thinking that was his contribution in everything that he touched. He applied Kabbalah, and man, we needed it badly at the time, right? It was like from the first that really systemized it. I mean, there were other works that, other people did it, like the Mishras Hasidim, tried to systemize it. And the Rashash, he systemized the Kavanas, right? That's his big contribution. He pulled the Kavanas together. But Ramchal did it regarding all of it, the Elon, right? The whole system of reality, of the cosmos, cosmic scale, right? So not say he was the only one, but he did the most inclusive job. And then others followed in his lead, like Rav Isaac Chaver with his Pischei She'orim, but the Ramchal had already laid the groundwork, and it was like very much based on Ramchal when he came to do his, right? But then there was something else which sets Ramchal, as starting a whole school of thought in Kabbalah, of where he said, and then the Nefesh Chaim accepted this idea, and presumably all the time the Goyim did, because all the Talmidim don't go with it, except the Leshem for some reason doesn't, even though Leshem wasn't a Talmud of the Goyim, but he claims that the Goyim is not in the same Chita as Ramchal. But Ramchal came with a whole general approach that what it's written in Zohar and Ari is just a mushal, meaning to say this. Everyone knows it's not to be taken literally in the physical sense. It's like, there's like divine lights that are called Ein Hashem, like Eretz Asher Ein Hashem Okechaba, Yimincha Hashem Nedari Bakach, Yimincha Hashem Tiratzoyeh, right? All right, these are divine lights, and it's not to be taken literally in the physical sense, right? So what does it mean? Well, whatever. Somehow intuitively you understand what it means, but if these things are divine lights, there's nothing physical. Because to say physical would be a total violation of our Ikrei Emunah that everyone agrees, everyone accepts the Gimel Ikrim of the Rambam, which includes that Hashem has no form whatsoever. Okay, the Rambam comes and says it's more than that. These are just buzzwords, Rom Mishalim, and I'm going to reveal the Nimshal. Right? I'm going to give one example. The concept that Igulim and Yosher. Right, the round and the straight, the round and the straight. There's Esespheres are in the derech of Igulim, where they're like inside each other, like concentric circles, and there's Yosher, which is the way we know them: Chesed, right side, or left side. There's a Kav Yamin, Kav Small, right? Right. So of course, so the Ramah is just to give an example. This the Ramah is this example. He says this himself. It's like this, it's a mushal. Now of course these things do exist. Ramchal doesn't say it's a mushal as if these things exist, but the way that they are articulated, the Zohar and the Ari are speaking b'derech mushal, like the Nevi'im when they describe what they saw in heaven. They're not saying, everyone knows they didn't see physical things. When when I say Pnei Ari, Pnei Shore, right, in the Merkava, right? So just like we understand by the Nevi'im that it's Mesholim for different ways Hashem runs the world, right? And it's talking about the spiritual root of the animals, but it's a hanhaga from which these animals come. Well, so the Ramchal said, so like you understand that by Nevi'im it's all Mishalim, but the Navi's not lying, there are things that he perceived, and those things are, but the way he described what he perceived is b'derech mashal. It's the Mare, and there's the Pisron. Like the Ram writes, he describes what he saw, and that's all like a mashal, in the words of Rambam. And then there's the Nimshal, which the Rambam calls the Pisron, right? And of course, the mashal is not sheker. The mashal is describing something real, right? But it's describing it the derech mashal, right? So Ramchal said Kabbalah is the same thing, and then Ramchal doubled down because people thought that when Ramchal said everything that says in the Ari is a mashal, as if it's not real. It's not real. No, it's real. There's discussing reality, b'derech mashal, right? And now what's the nimshal, right? But it's describing real things, not the mashal that lo hayav lo nivra, like a king once sent his son to travel. That's like a mashal that never happened, right? And there's like some moral message. That's not the mashal that we're talking about. Mashal is to describe something, the derech mashal, using a mashal's way of describing something, right? We do this in advanced physics, right? When a teacher wants to give, so they say, like, imagine billiard balls, and he's describing particles, right? So you're describing something, the derech mashal. And so the Ramchal brought to our attention that, which is another thing that that people weren't clear about. And even between the Ari students, there was a machloket. How literally do we take the master? Right? In between the Talmidei Ari, there were differences of approach. As the Ari is speaking derech mashal, I'm here to be megaled in nimshal. And that became the Litvische approach to Kabbalah. That let's go back to Igulim and Yosher. So everyone agrees Yosher means justice, right? So now why is it called Yosher? Justice, right? And Midas Hadin, now Schar Vonish. Because in justice, everyone gets differently. You get what you deserve, and everyone's different, right? No two people are, the same, because one guy did more, one guy did less, one guy did even less, but he's an oinus, so you can't be held against us. Everyone gets uniquely ish, the female love. And that's like in straight lines, there are differences, right? Straight lines, you give like a bechesed, this guy gets punishment, but then, because in straight lines, you can have a top down, a right, and a left. Top down, more or less, higher madrega, lower madrega. Everyone, Lefi is steiging. And then there's chesed or din. Do you deserve chesed? Do you deserve din? Do you deserve it's in the middle, rachamim, right? That's Yosha. Igulim, in a circle, there's no top, there's no down, there's no right, there's no left. Everything is equally distant from the center. Right? That's a hanhaga where he gives to everyone equally, right? What's that like? Laws of nature. Look, everyone. I'm a big tzaddik. I'm still bound by the laws of gravity, equally like the Russia. Chazal even look at it in a certain way, positive. That's that a Yom Kshamim is even bigger than Tchias HaMesim. Tchias HaMesim is only for tzaddikim. Yom Kshamim is for the tzaddik and the Russia. So there's a certain divine kindness there that you should appreciate, and that's what it is, because it's like Chesed Gomor, but which is not always positive, because you want the geschmack of working, right, and earning, right. That's what we were created for. With mitzvahs, shouldn't be namak yitzufa, but in Chesed, everyone gets equally, right. You give the American citizen and the illegal immigrant equally, right. Problem is, like the Democrats, they want igulim, but that's but it's the opposite of yosher. It's no justice, and it's terrible. Right? Igulim is not always good. Igulim is a certain hanhaga, where everyone gets equally. So sometimes that's a big chesed, and sometimes that's it's terrible. It's a negation of justice. So the laws of nature, right, apply to the tzaddik and Russia equally, right? So now the amazing thing that the Ramchal pointed out is that the mashal, right? So there's hanhagas like the laws of nature, though that's Sayyid Igul. It applies to everyone equally. And then there's the Yosher, where everyone gets, and the Esther spheres can function both ways, right? It can function in a manner where everyone's getting equally from these midas, and it function in a way that some people get more, some people get less, right? And it's complicated. There's the laws of economy that apply to everyone equally, supply and demand. And yet some people somehow make more money and some people somehow make less money. And it's not because this guy is contrary, this guy is lazy, right? So it's an amazing thing how it could be the Yosher and the Igulim, and the Yosher is hiding behind the Igulim because the laws of commerce and laws of physics are the same. So he explains, so these are anhagas. But the beauty of the way Ramchal is that he's not negating the beauty and the significance of the mashal, because there's something very interesting about, we said nature is igulim. The laws of nature apply to everyone equally. That's the secret, that the earth is round and the skies are round. Right? To the point that the Yerushalmi says, "My sheni ain ribu of a masa breaks. Nothing natural is square. If you see something like straight edge, there was human intervention. Because nothing natural is perfectly square. Right? A rock, a rock formation. It's kind of roundish. See if it's not perfectly round, but still, because the laws of nature are igulim. So this mashal, is not just. So again, it's a certain description of reality. It doesn't, the meaning is not limited to the lashon hamashal, but the mashal is not an empty mashal either. Using the mashal was beneficial, not just for the idea it alludes to, but using the lashon of the mashal could explain also the physical characteristics of what is visible. That's the secret behind anything natural is kind of roundish. No, ain ribu b'masa bracious, right? So Ramchal developed a whole system of which became, even though he was not Ashkenazi, he was Italian. Italian is like a birya b'fnei atzma. The interesting thing is that party lines were different back then. Even though it was Ashkenazim versus Sephardim versus, the Italians viewed themselves in a not Ashkenaz, not Sfarad, but the best of both worlds. The Ramchal himself seemed to identify as Sephardic. I can't say for sure. Like I say, he was Italian. And the Italians consider themselves their own thing. But in the Derech Hashem, in the Kabbalah Tefillah, explains Nusach Sfard. But that's not a proof, because everyone was Kabbalistically inclined daven Nusach Sfard, because that's how the Ari explained Nusach Sfard. Right, but a friend of mine, Rav Shlomo Lowenbraun, in Shalayim, told me that they found the machzor of the Ramchal was Nusach Ashkenaz. But here's the thing: it's not that we said he davened Sfard, right? Right? Yeah, but he had a gig as a chazan by the Yomim Noroim by the Ashkenazim. So whether he was Sfaradi or whether he was Italian. I think it's best to say he was Italian. And the original Italians from back then were like, they viewed themselves as Bria B'fnei. His Talmud, who was older than Ramat Bali, has Torah on this. Ashkenazim are too much this, Sfardim are too much that. Italians just right. Yeah. Anyway, but but listen, you got to make some money, right? So he took a job as a chazan for Yom Noraim by the Ashkenazim. So for Yom Noraim, he had an Ashkenazi machzor. They found the machzor, right? And they say, so he scribbled in the margin some kavanas, right? But he also scribbled in the margin, here, sing this tune, and for this one, do this tune. Yeah. Anyways, how we get into this? Yeah. Oh, I mean to say this: that the Ramchal laid his school of thought, which, like I say, the Talmidim of the Gon and Talmidim, right? However, he laid down the school of thought of the Ashkenazi approach to Kabbalah, of taking called a philosophical approach that the terms of the Ari are marshal, and we have to seek the nimshal, as opposed to saying to be literalist, but it's literal, but just not physical. So he was, and Ada Yom Hazeh, Sfaradim say about the Derech of the Ramchal, Zelo Kabbalah ze philosophia. It's philosophy. It's not Kabbalah. It was a big machlokas. The real Sfaradim reject the Ramchal, even though he was not Ashkenazi. I guess he was Italian. He was Italian, which was a Biria b'fnei Atma, but it set the tone for the stereotypical Ashkenazic approach to Kabbalah. Which is to take a philosophical approach, which that machlokas, which remains a machlokas. It also split Hasidic schools got split over this machlokas. Interestingly enough, Hasidim believe the Ramchal is a tzaddik. Right? They don't believe, as if he was chas v'sholom a fake, but they, but it could be said in general, Hasidim don't go with the Ramchal most of the time. Chabad, that's in that derech of taking a philosophical approach to Kabbalah, still say, we don't go with the Ramchal. We have our own philosophy, right? But you have the people like Ziddich of Kamarna that say that they didn't like Chabad. It shouldn't be philosophical. They didn't like the Ramchal, and they didn't like Chabad. Even though Ramchal and Chabad are, they're on the same side of things in a very general sense, but Chabad doesn't go with the Ramchal. We have our own philosophical explanations. We have our own philosophical explanations. So this machlokas of whether you take Kabbalah literally, just it's not physical, or not literally at all. It's all misholim, but of course, not an empty mashal. It's a mashal describing a reality, right? Not a mashal that lo hayav lo nivra. It's a mashal describing something that exists, right? But that's not its real meaning. There's a meaning behind that mashal, right? So the Hasidim themselves were divided on this point, even though they endorsed Ramchal, and amongst the Ashkenazim, by and large, they went with the Ramchal's approach. It became the approach, especially in Litta. But the Leshem, interestingly enough, was a Litvisher, even though he doesn't go with Hasidim, right? But he tried to get back to the original, the Sephardic way. So it's interesting. The Leshem's very interesting. It was an Ashkenazi that tried to go back to the Sephardic way, but still fought the Litvak. So he does say a lot of explanation, but he doesn't like breaking down the terms in the philosophical terms. I wrote a book. I wrote a essay on this, and something that I put out for Shmuley Bergman's wedding. The Pirush of the Ramah and the Moreh Nevuchim, and I go into because this idea that Kabbalah could be rendered into a philosophical jargon didn't start with the Ramchal. The Ramchal just learned up the Ari this way. But in the pre-Ari days, there are some people like the Ramah who used to learn the Zohar with the Moreh Nevuchim. They say the Zohar speaking its jargon, and it could all be translated into philosophical jargon. The Ramchal, made it moshel v'nimshol, and he also applied it to the Torah of the Ari. Right? So, he is the father of the standard Ashkenazi Litvisher approach to Kabbalah, that which is also which is basically like Reb Chaim's approach to Lumdus. Reb Chaim, Reb Shimon, Chazak. So they break it down. Is it a birur or is it a hanhaga? Right? As it were, the Torah is using its jargon, and we break it up into other jargon with the Chakira. Or we say, should we translate the term like this or translate the term like that? breaking down the term into other terms. So it's lumdus. It's litvish lumdus. The Ramchal did litvish lumdus even before Reb Chaim, but he did it to the field of Kabbalah. Right? But like everyone agrees, chazaka or Amotz Chavel Varaya that's discussing a real din, but then we break up those terms into other terms. Anyway, all right. Look, I'm exhausted. We've been at this for over an hour and a half. All right. So, any questions before we call the night? So now, if you go to the website evanchasia.com and you put in the search engine Ramchal, lots of stuff. You'll hear stuff we didn't say tonight. And you have all of tomorrow's the Yahrtzeit. You'll hear a lot of stuff we didn't even say tonight, first of all. But also, another thing I'd like you to go to, listen, let's make a donation. Lili Nishmas from Moshe Chaim ben Yaakov Luzzato. Give some stock Lili Nishmas. So do me a favor, give it to our organization so we can continue to spread the Ramchal's Torah and as well as all our other activities. So please go to evangelia.com, hit the donate button, and make a donation. Lui Nishmas Ramchal and his Chutzo Yogin Aleinu Baal Kol Yisrael L'chaim L'chaim. Right? Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Please go to the website, get more stuff on Ramchal, and please make a donation. And subscribe to the channel so you'll always get notifications when I go live, because sometimes the mood just grips me. And if you're subscribed, you'll get notification immediately in your inbox that I'm online. Take care on Thursday night, 10 o'clock, Hashkafa Hotline. See you then. But please go now to the website, get more stuff in Ramchal, and make a donation. Li Nishmas from Moshe Chaim ben Yaakov Luzzato. Susla Yogin Aleinu, Val Kol Yisrael.